Hello and good morning friends, welcome to CEC live lectures. Dear friends, today in this session we are going to continue with our series on Indian writing in English translation, and today we are going to talk on Bhasa'S Sswapnavasa Datta, and for this discussion we have once again with us in our studios Professor Anand Prakash. Professor Anand Prakash is a retired professor of English from Department of English, University of Delhi. Dr. Prakash has immense knowledge, immense experience undoubtedly, but he believes that whatever he has, he wants to give to the students, to the admirers who love English and who has affinity towards the subject. Dear friends, if you want to ask questions from Professor Anand Prakash on the particular topic, then you can call right in the studio. You can contact us through our toll-free number. Our number is 1800-110-430. I repeat, our number is 1800-110-430. Dear friends, you are requested to call in the last 10 minutes of the lecture so that the lecture goes uninterrupted and your queries are also solved. So let's welcome our guest Professor Anand Prakash and let's try to have a deep insight into the topic. Hello sir, welcome to the lecture.
Thank you Geetika for your kind words, and welcome viewers. And as has been announced by our able anchor, today's lecture is on Bhasa'S Sswapnavasa Datta. It's a longish title of the text that I'll be discussing today, and I'll explain right in the beginning as to what this title means in the literal sense of the word. Swapnavasa Datta, as if you slightly separate one part of the word from the other, then it is Swapna, that is dream or vision, and Vasa Datta is the name of the woman who is at the center of the play. So it is actually the dream of Vasa Datta or the vision of Vasa Datta. So Vasa Datta is a character. She is a queen, and she is in hiding at the moment as the play opens, and she will remain in hiding till the end of the play. But then in between there is a scene which is central to the text, and because of this reason the title is given Sswapnavasa Datta. Who is Bhas? When did he live? Which other plays he wrote, if at all? All these questions are actually based on a kind of surmise, a kind of guesswork, as I've been saying regarding texts belonging to the ancient Indian writing. And one can say arguably that Sswapnavasa Datta's Bhas, Sswapnavasa Datta written by Bhas, is one of the earliest plays in the history of Indian writing in English, Indian writing, which is now available in English translation, which is the series of our title also. So we have to consider this text as historical in nature. It is a fantasy, it's a play, it's a work of literature. At the same time, because it is produced way back in time, before the birth of Christ, BC that is, and for that reason it has significance at two levels, at the level of history and at the level of literature. So we will be discussing this text today by Bhas as a text that belongs to the ancient period, and it reflects the reality, the social relations, the politics, the state of emotional makeup of characters way back in time, so many hundreds years ago, 2 millennia and more. And let's now give a few think of a few facts that relate to this writer and to this text. The first thing is that there is no biographical account, there is no biographical detail available today about Bhas, as to who Bhas was, or what his original name was, or where he came from, or where he worked. And some people have scholars, that is. Venkat Chalam is a scholar whose book I consulted when I was digging for details. And it is said that a person like Bhas would never write anything about himself. He belongs to that age-old tradition of remaining always in the background. Writers in those days would not generally announce their names. And in the case of Bhas, he didn't announce his name even in the beginning of the verse that is there in the play, because some writers like Kalidas would do it, like Shudrak would do it. These two texts and these two writers we'll deal with in the series. But this writer did not mention his name even there. Plays are available today in translation as well as in original Sanskrit, and these plays number around 10. People say they are 13, but since authenticity is not there, so one can only say that these plays would have been written by him. The plays do not bear his name. Even Sswapnavasa Datta does not bear his name. And then because there is no name and there is no writer for that reason, so people refer to other aspects of accounts. For instance, if other writers later would refer to him as a person existing before them, then that is one source. And Kalidas mentions him. Earlier we thought that Kalidas was the first writer of plays in India, but then Kalidas mentions him and mentions him with respect. And a writer of the caliber of Kalidas talking about Bhas, in that sense of regard and respect, shows that this person would have been quite important in the time of Kalidas, and he would have established himself as a writer of sensitivity, as a writer who would excite imagination and attention, and therefore one can say that this person would have then existed maybe a couple of centuries before Kalidas wrote his plays and his poetry. Shudrak also mentions him, the other writer who belongs to the same period, which means that he is pre-Shudrak and pre-Kalidas. He was writing, let's say, Kalidas's time would be, I think the first century of the AD. So Kalidas referring to him means that he goes back to time, into the time by a couple of centuries. And there are references in some Buddhist texts also to this person. Therefore, it means that he can be further stretched back to the segment of time, and roughly he would be writing and existing, of course, as a person 300 or 400 years before Christ's birth. So how many years would that be? We are now living in the 21st century, so 2000 years and more, and then add another 300 years or 400 years before that. So it means 2400 years ago this person was writing, and he was writing in established Sanskrit, and he was visualizing his action, the action that was there in the text, in the form of drama. And drama in those days would not be just in the written form, and people would not have the wherewithal, the facilities of making dramas available for reading. Therefore, dramas would be staged. So which means that this person wrote for the drama mode, but drama mode then would be entirely given to the stage, the theatre. So it's a theatre kind of writing, right? Writing for use in the theatre. And for that reason, action has to be invented, action has to be strategized, action has to be planned in such a manner that it becomes important for the stage. So it's a stage-worthy kind of a play, and which means that in India, at that time, 500 years ago, the tradition of stage was alive and kicking. It was appealing. It appealed to the audience, and plays would be performed. I say all this because this is the first discussion on drama, and I say that if drama was at that time written for stage purposes, then things would have developed culturally along lines of communication, along lines of presentation. And if that is the case, then one would know that Bhas would be writing for a particular audience. Which audience would he be writing? This is the question that I can ask from myself. This is the question that you can ask from yourselves, because when the writer writes for stage, then the writer knows who is going to watch his play, and for which particular audience he would be writing is the question that we can ask from ourselves. And the answer obviously is that the writer has presented a kind of action, a nature of action, and if that appeals to a particular audience, then he will be writing for that audience. So because the appeal here in the play, is a very subtle appeal. It's an appeal that's not easily decipherable, easily to be interpreted. Therefore, one can say that the writer was writing for the court audience or for the elite audience, for the audience that would enjoy and appreciate this play. So, it is written perhaps for the court drama. Now, one interesting thing before I tell you more facts about this writer and writing, this particular person, there's a kind of guesswork today as to who this person was, and fortunately, there are people devoted to the study of Sanskrit literature, in a very serious sense, in the southern part of our country, in the South India. Therefore, some of the scholars of the 20th century believe that this person was, born in very humble surroundings. He was born in a poor family, and one person, this T.S. Narayan Shastri, a scholar of Sanskrit literature, has guessed, that this person was perhaps the son of a washerman, and he himself was a washerman for some time. So imagine he's born in one of the poor, low-based, families or communities in the country. And if he later on rose to the heights of writing a play for the court audience, then you can see the kind of jump that he had in his literary and poetic career. Anyway, this is all myth so far as we are concerned. There is no trace of this kind of an origin in his play, particularly the one that I am talking about today. But then, since there is a serious scholar of the 20th century who is telling us about this, so let's bear this in mind. In fact, this Venkatachalam has used the word of kind of proletariat at that time. So he is a proletarian writer, a writer coming from the proletarian section, and then he is writing about the reality as he saw it, as he imagined it in his own time. So, as I have already told you, the title talks about or puts in focus the vision of Bhasa'S Datta, that woman who saw a dream or who was in a dream, and that dream had no repercussions. Therefore, the play has earned its title from there. An important aspect of drama writing in India, and when I am talking about Bhasa'S Datta, Sswapnavasa Datta, then I am talking of, I am also slightly aware of the rich Greek tradition in the writing of plays, and the time coincides. The Greek plays would have been written immediately after the epics were presented in different parts of Greece, and here also we had two epics before this. We had Ramayana and we had Mahabharata. So that similarity is there between Greek writing and the Indian the Indian writing, and because the plays were written there, and so plays were written here also, and there would be a vital link between epic writing and plays. In fact, I can say that when plays are written and they take their inspiration from epics, then one can easily say that epics also would have some kind of a drama in them. And if you think of Mahabharata, if you can think of Ramayana, then there is a lot of drama in it. There are lots of clashes, lots of different opinions, and these opinions, have an audience of their own. Some people believe in one kind of a thing, another section of people believes in the other set of moral principles and all. Therefore, the drama is ingrained in the Indian epics, and it was ingrained in the Greek epics. So maybe that vital link will explain partly as to how drama originated in India at that point of time. So the play, the convention, this person doesn't follow the convention of drama writing. Like in Greece, there are plays, which go from one point of action to another point of action, and neatly divided into acts. Here also there are acts. This play has 6 acts, but these acts are they appear only to be formal. They appear only on the play appears to be informal. It merely just stops at one place and then takes up another episode. Whether that episode takes the action forward or not is a question that doesn't seem to be important for the writer. But then, on the whole, when 6 acts are presented, performed on the stage, then a picture of totality emerges in the play. So he is not bothered about 5 acts or 3 acts. Well, if there are 6 acts, then he is fine with 6 acts also. So far as this play is concerned, it has 6 acts. Now, Bhas seems to be taking liberties with convention. Maybe conventions establish themselves later, but he would have definite models before him. There is no information about those models, and he is presenting things as if he is deciding on the basis of the requirements that he has in this play. So if he doesn't require this, then he will change the convention. He will change the kind of ritual that is supposed to be observed. For instance, the play would start with some kind of a puja, some kind of a worship, and when a kind of prayer, and the prayer would be using musical instruments, and it would be just sung in the beginning, as on many important occasions in India, even today. This prayer is presented, and immediately after the prayer, the Sutradhar comes. Now, Sutradhar in certain plays in India has a very important role to play, a longish role. The Sutradhar comments, Sutradhar comes as a character, Sutradhar takes things forward, Sutradhar becomes a kind of a bridge between the audience on one side and the actors on the stage on the other. But here the Sutradhar is just a medium of information, and he has not much role to play. So he appears only for 1 or 2 minutes in the play, and after that he disappears. But then, and the prayer in Sanskrit, drama is called Nandi. So Nandi is performed, Nandi is presented, and after that the play begins. Now, who are the important characters? I already said that Bhasa'S Datta is an important character, but then Bhasa'S Datta is being presented as a woman who is bound by certain points of necessity. This will come later. But then Bhasa'S Datta is seen in the first act as a woman in disguise. She is the queen, and she has decided to be guided not by her husband, the king, but by this other person who is quite important in the stage. He seems to be a kind of an officer in the stage, a kind of an advisor to the king. And this person, his name is Yogandharayan, and this Yogandharayan has hatched a kind of a plan with the queen, that is Bhasa'S Datta, and that is behind the back of the king. Why? This is at the center of the play. As to why this has happened, that there is a person who is the king's second-hand man, and he has, I don't use the word conspired, he has actually, thought of an action that will be guided by the king's interests without the king knowing about what the action is going to be. So the queen and Yogandharayan, they decide to do certain things in the play so that king's interests are served. The king should be happy. The king should be beholden that his officer and his wife, they have joined hands together to restore a kind of glory to him which he has lost or which he is going to lose in a short period of time. What is that loss that is being apprehended, and that has already happened in fact? The loss is that there is another person, contender to the throne, and this person has created difficult conditions for the king. His name is Aruni, and he has taken over the state, and the present king doesn't know how to get back his authority in the state, and the king is just worried about it, that he might lose all influence in life, and his rule will be taken over by another king. So what should they do? And king cannot do much. King is a very fine, nice person with a set of principles and values. He is very emotional. He is handsome. He is young. He doesn't have that kind of maturity and experience that people get when they've governed things for a long time. So the king that way is slightly handicapped with respect to restoration of his glory, restoration of his power. And Yogandharayan is the officer. He is a kind of advisor, as I said. He is a minister, and he says, okay, he'll do it. And he doesn't want to tell the king. Why? Because he has the plan that the king should have a tie-up with another king elsewhere, a Magad king. This person is an Avanti. So Avanti's king, will require some kind of a tie-up with the Magad king, and that tie-up is at that point of time going to be on the basis of the marriage of Magad king's daughter with the king that we are talking about of Avanti. And how can this happen when the king already has a queen, Vasava Datta? And then it becomes important for Yogandharayan and also the king that he should marry the princess of Magad. Now, it is all right. There is a kind of political intrigue. There is a kind of political manipulation. There are tricks that are being played. Policies are being made, and marriage is one of the important connections in ancient period. When one has to become strong, then one should marry into the family of another king so that the two forces get together. So this is what the ethos in the ancient India is, and Yogandharayan says and thinks, that he will have a tie-up with Magad king, and Magad's princess, who is very beautiful, she will be marrying our present king, and the king should not know, because the king is very emotional about his own wife. He is totally devoted to her as a husband. He loves her deeply and immensely, and he will not agree, thinks Yogandharayan, to marry another princess and just either replace his present wife or have two wives together, because he doesn't want his love to be divided between two women. So this is a very tricky kind of situation, and the Yogandharayan says to the queen that you have to make this sacrifice, and you have to accept this marriage, even though it is at your cost. And the queen, thinking that she has to protect her husband, so she can think of losing her own place and position in family, and decide that somebody else should come and take her place. This is the dilemma of Bhasa'S Sswapnavasa. This is the dilemma of Vasava Datta, and the two hatch a plan. And this is the plan that at some point of time, maybe in a couple of days or so, the story will be spread. Says Bhas, as the composer, as the writer of the play, that the king was caught in a fire and she was burned down to death. And therefore, the king has lost his wife, and he is now eligible to marry into another family. And the king and the queen then, she is not dead, but she has to announce, and the two announce, the queen died, in fire. This is how the play begins. And then there is the first act is the act, of a hermitage, of what is called, a penance grove, and the person Yogandharayan and the queen in disguise, Vasava Datta, they go to this penance grove, where and when they go to this in Sanskrit this is called Tapovan. So where the rishis just do their meditation and all, and they live a simple life, and which means that the state would be at that point of time organizing support and help to the Tapovan, and simple people, nice people with imagination and knowledge. These people would be leading a simple life and away from the humdrum of society at that time. So Yogandharayan and the queen in disguise, Vasava Datta, they go to this Tapovan, and lucky for them that on that particular day, the princess of Magad also is coming. And Yogandharayan says, well, I am an ordinary person and I have a sister, and I want that sister to be kept in some kind of a protective arrangement, and if the princess can take her in her charge and protect her, then he can go away and do some work, and finally he will come back and he will ask his sister to come along with him, and that's how he wants this kind of help. And the princess of Magad agrees to this, and she says, okay, if there is a woman like this and I want to help, I can help, then I will definitely help her. So this is how the plot is starting in the play at this time. In the second, third, fourth, fifth and sixth acts, the plan of Yogandharayan takes the back seat. What he is doing elsewhere is not discussed at all. So in a way, the plan was introduced. The plan might come up towards the end in the form of a resolution of the problem of the king. But the play stretches from the leaving of Vasava Datta in disguise in the ashram, and then she will be taken to the palace because the princess lives there. So the princess who is going to marry the king, Udayan, and Vasava Datta, these two women will live in the palace. And this new woman, that is this queen in disguise, she'll be just an ordinary person. If an individual came and he needed help and he was an ordinary person, and he said to the princess that please keep my sister with you, and I'll come back and then take her away. Since I have a problem and I'll be solving that problem in the meantime. So the entire action of the play then revolves around the association of the queen and the princess. And since queen's behavior is partly guided by the interests of her husband, therefore the queen is always in doldrums. Should she allow another woman to take her place for the benefit and for the interests of her own husband? This is something that is very difficult to handle for a woman. Her emotional self and the self that is devoted to her husband, these two come in clash with each other. And this seems to be at the core, at the center of the play. And let's see how this is worked out. Now, I would like to, take it up in some length after this. But let me tell you that if this thing is presented as a problem, then it can, challenge the writer in terms of how this thing can be worked out. And the writer, will have to use all his intellectual, all his imaginative resources to imagine, situations in which the queen and the princess, they spend their time together, and the queen is fighting her own demons. She is fighting her own problems inside herself, inside her mind. How to, emotionally, accept something that goes against her interests. So these things, will compel the writer. These things will force the writer to go into the realm of guess, and there's going to be a fantasy now, because the two women will live at the level of mind and imagination. So how this fantasy is going to work is the issue that the writer is contending with, the writer is trying to sort out, and how he does it, and how deftly he handles this, and how finally the king's interests are protected, and the princess becomes the wife, and how the elder queen, adjusts with her. These are the questions that are taken up in the play. So I'll briefly, a little later, talk about this thing, and then I'll comment also on the play as an aesthetic piece, as an artistic piece, as a piece which appeals to our senses as well as to our intellect. So this is going to happen in the discussion later. Thank you. Welcome back, friends, and now I'll give you two kinds of information regarding this play as to how the drama unfolds itself, how it is worked out, and then I'll devote some time to the general issue of the play as an aesthetic piece. So first part, how this fantasy is worked out. Now, the queen and the princess, they are spending time together, and the princess has become very fond of the queen as a person. She knows that she's not an ordinary person. She has great levels of great levels of sensitivity and emotion. So she has in fact developed a kind of interest in her. She is taking her as a senior person who will be kind to her. She is influenced by her sense of values, her sense of affection, and the way she takes care of the princess, the way the two spend time, and both of them feel easy in each other's company. So they have developed a kind of friendship, which is perhaps going to be good for the entire plan that has been made by Yogandharayan and the queen. And the background is being created for a normal, harmonious kind of a coexistence between the princess and the queen when the drama comes to an end. So this is one thing. The important thing, and because of which this play appeals to us greatly today, is that it talks about the Swapna. What is that Swapna? What is that vision that the writer is talking about? Now, the vision and the Swapna is not abstract as we consider the thing to be today. We think we go into the theory of the dream, we go into the theory of the vision, and then we say this is what happens in the mind of the person. Of course, the mind of the person is under great stress. Bhasa'S Datta, as I told earlier, Bhasa'S Datta is having that kind of up and down. She is going through ups and downs. Sometimes she is happy, sometimes she is not happy. In fact, she is never happy in the sense in which we understand the term, because she is away from her husband, and she is in a false situation of being dead and alive at the same time. She is dead for all other people as a queen, and she is alive as a person. And the king visits this place, is going to visit this place. How would she relate with him? He doesn't know that it's the same person, and he has in the meantime accepted the idea of marrying the second time. And it's the same person who loved Bhasa'S Datta earlier. So would he love her now? Would he love her? Would he retain that memory? Would he say that he had a queen earlier who died in very difficult circumstances, but if she were alive, then he would be happy with her? Would he say this? So the queen is facing this kind of a mental dilemma. This is what I called fighting with her own demons. She might have some kind of a jealousy. She might have a sense of competition. She might have a low self-esteem that another person is coming and she is younger, she is more beautiful, she may be more accomplished art-wise. All these things can visit the mind of the person who is being replaced from that high position of the queen. So these things are visiting, haunting, obsessing the mind of Bhasa'S Datta. What is the position of the princess? The princess, her name is Padmavati. The princess is young, beautiful, charming, and the king, his name is Udayan, the husband of Bhasa'S Datta. He has also reconciled to the idea of marriage with another woman. Because of course, he's clear in his head that he has lost his wife, and it is useful to marry a princess at this stage, because then the two kings will come together and they can fight that enemy which is back home and who has usurped power or snatched power from Udayan. So the king has a political argument in his favor, and he also will require company of a woman, because now his wife is not there. So the king is going to also face the same kind of dilemma. The king is more certain that he has lost his wife, therefore he can easily remarry, and that is good for him in fact, because he will have the company. And this thing bothers the wife, who has a very subtle kind of clash taking place in her mind. And that is when the Swapna becomes important. The Swapna will tell whether the king is devoted to the memory of the old queen, or whether he has already forgotten her and had decided to marry Padmavati, the princess. The writer then uses Swapna. Somebody falls in some kind of a state of sleep, and you can call it half sleep, and there the role of the Vidushak, the jester. In Shakespeare, this jester is called the fool. This becomes quite important, because the jester can always take your secrets, can keep them as secrets. He's the kind of the best man for the king. Most kings had their jesters. They would always talk with the jester. The jester would come and take out their secrets, will work them out humorously. People also would laugh. But everybody knew that the jester in the court is going to be always on the side of the king. So this Vidushak sits next to the king, and the king is fallen in some kind of a sleep. I don't call it exactly sleep. And they start discussing and talking, and the king is not very, at that point of time, very conscious. And Vidushak then, out of curiosity, asks, "How much do you like your old queen? And how much do you like this person?" The king wants to avoid this answer, avoid this question, because this question means that if he says that he likes the old queen, then he will be hurting the sentiments of the princess, and somebody will come to know, somebody will overhear, and somebody is going to report to the princess. In fact, this is where Bhas is able to compose the scene very well, because he has put both the women, the queen and the princess, on a side. The king doesn't know that they are hearing him, but they are hearing him all the time. And this person, the king is posed the question. The question is posed to him: whom does he like better? The princess whom he is going to marry, or the queen who is dead? And the king initially wants to avoid, but Vidushak is asking him, and very genuinely the king says that he can't forget his old wife. He loves her. If this person had been alive, then he would never thought of marrying the new person. And then once again the Vidusha asks the question: do you like the princess more or the queen more? And at one point of time, the king says, "Oh, sorry, I like the queen more. I don't like the princess that much. Of course, I like her, but not that much." So see the subtle way in which the question is posed by the jester, and in a state of half sleep, one can call it, because he's just in a mood, where he is fallen asleep, or sort of. And then he says this, so he can't be wrong also. You can't, say that he's lying. And why should he lie? In such a case where the queen is dead and the princess is around there. So the king has very directly and clearly told his preference for the old queen. Now this is very subtle, and this is very sweetly presented on the stage. So now think of the other woman. Think of the princess. The queen is very happy. The queen is finally, she stabilizes mentally that the husband has not forgotten her, and he still says that he prefers the memory of the queen more than the prospects of living with this woman. He said it in his own way, and she is quite satisfied. What about the princess? How would she take it, this kind of a comment? Now this is where Bhas's sense of a subtle balance between the two situations is really remarkable. He makes this girl, makes this woman, princess, so very charming and simple and believing that she doesn't mind it. And she doesn't know that the person sitting next to her, the woman, is the queen herself. But she says, okay, it's possible that I'm beautiful and I'm good and all that, but maybe that woman was better than me. And so the king is right in his own answer, and the king is my master. In those days, women always looked up to the man who would be their husband as the person, the last person in the world to criticize. So they would always think that this person can never be wrong, whatever the reason. The princess has not minded it. So now you know that there is no villain in the situation. The two contenders, both of them, are reconciled to the idea that that the king is supreme and the king can't be wrong, and the king has decided in favor of the old queen, and the new would-be queen is listening, but then she doesn't mind. This is one beautiful part of the dream. You can say this is a kind of dream that is there in the case of the king to begin with. The second situation in the dream, and this is the dream of Bhasa'S Datta. And once again, not exactly Bhasa'S Datta, because Bhasa'S Datta is not asleep. But then maybe she is a part of the dream. Like in this case, she was a part of the dream. So later on, when the dream is extended further, then once again she will see as to what the king does. So what happens is that suddenly in the pleasure garden, or in the garden of the women, where they relaxed and the king was allowed to come in because he was going to marry the princess. So they are spending their time there, and there is a bed that is made for the king and the new queen, that would be the Padmavati, and that bed is made, and Padmavati is supposed to come and sleep next to him. And once again, at the time when Padmavati would lie down on the bed, at that very moment she is taken ill. She has very severe headache, and people say, okay, now now that she has headache, so she is moved. So she is moved away from the bed, and in the meantime, the old queen, that is Bhasa'S Datta, she comes towards it, searching for her mate, her princess, and she doesn't find the princess there, and she says, okay, now that princess will come later, and she just lies down, and in the meantime, the king comes. Now, because the king is not able to see very clearly as to who the woman is, so therefore he comes and he falls asleep next to her, and then in the dream he once again sees a woman sitting next to her, lying down next to her, sleeping next to her, and he wakes up and he thinks that this is the old queen. How come that the old queen is still there? He thought that she was dead. So he starts talking to her and he's very happy, that the queen is alive. And at the same time, he should not know that the queen is alive. Therefore, this secret is kept, in a certain balance, that he is perhaps asleep. He says he is not asleep, he is half asleep, and in the sleep he is not clear. But then he has talked to his own wife, who is actually in person there, and he thought that he was seeing a kind of a dream. And he tries to wake up completely, and he cannot. And at one point of time, when the queen has seen this, and the queen is quite gratified to see this, then she decides to leave the bed, because finally if he comes to know, then the whole plan will fall. So at one point of time, when he goes to sleep, then his hand is hanging away from the bed. So she puts her hand back to the bed and she leaves the room. And when the king wakes up again, and this time there's no woman. And then other people are there to help the king, and they say, and the queen says, where is my wife, the old wife? He says, there is no old wife. What are you talking about? He said, no, I saw her. He said, you were asleep, maybe you saw in the dream. So this kind of a dream, where he sees and not sees, he doesn't see. That he believes and does not believe. That he has seen reality or he's seen some kind of vision. This has become the central point of this play. And later on, this is the central part, and it's really very appealing for the audience, and so subtly presented by the writer in all respects, that this appears to be the beauty of the play. That it's a new kind of a thing. It's somebody who thinks that reality is illusion and illusion is reality. This person has felt that at his own level in the play, that what he saw was what he did not see, or what he did not see was actually the reality. So see the kind of balance that he is able to create between the illusion and the reality. So this is that Sswapnavasa Datta, the Swapna of which Bhasa'S Datta was a part, and the king was dreaming about her, and he was dreaming, and in the dream he saw the reality. Now see the circular way in which the play has been presented on the stage. So this actually becomes the soul of this play, and finally one is not interested very much in the ending of the play, because Yogandharayan is all the time active on that front. He has in the meantime taken help from the king of Awadh, and their armies have joined, and after joined, they went back to Avanti. The armies, the minister was there, Yogandharayan, and he defeated Aruni. This is informed in the last act of the play, that this is what happened. But this is kept out of the purview of the play. The play is about the fight or the struggle or the clash or some kind of a contention between the old queen and the new would-be queen. So this is the whole play. Let me repeat that the play starts with a kind of political arrangement that is going to happen later in the background, and in the foreground are three characters: the king, his old queen who is supposed to be dead, and the new woman, the princess, who will be the new queen. And at the end, when the play presents the resolution, then the resolution is that old this enemy Aruni has been defeated, and his rule is back to normalcy, back to himself. So you can now take away the princess, the daughter of the king of our Magad, along with his old wife. So then he realizes that his wife is alive, and his wife has accepted the new princess as the second wife of the king, and everything is happy. So everybody is happy with the arrangement. So Yogandaran has succeeded, the king has succeeded in getting back his wife, and Magad, the princess, also is happy that she is getting such a fine person as her husband, who is so truthful, who is so very sincere to his wife, and he is sincere to his wife. He is going to be equally good for the new queen now. So in every respect, the play ends on a happy note. It's a happy play, but see the subtle working, and in the background there is a lot of tragedy. Let's not forget this. It's not a simple play. It's a play where things have been worked out to the satisfaction of the audience. But then, in the course of acting out all these things, you realize that things would have gone either way. Maybe Aruni would not be defeated. Maybe the new princess would not be happy with this arrangement. Maybe the queen herself would at some point of time blurted out that she was alive. Maybe the king would have been untrue or unfaithful to her. All these things are there. So there is a possibility of tragedy. There is a possibility of pain. There is a possibility of sadness. And pain and sadness are there always in the mind of the old queen. That is the case. Now, having so many options in the play, and the writer working out a solution, and with difficulty he is able to solve all the problems, all this shows that the writer was going into the nitty-gritty of the play, the different situations of the play, in such a manner that he would finally come out unscathed by the force of circumstance and present to the audience a kind of entertainment of a very high order. So this is the play. Now I'll take a few things, one or two things, and if there are questions, I'd be glad to take questions. But then let me say one or two things in general about the play, and if there are no questions, then I'll carry on with the point that I'm making. First, you see the handling of the plan in the play. The plan, that Yogandaran is going to make all the arrangements, and the plan of the queen and the princess and the king in the palace of the Magad king, how that is being handled, and the play impresses there. The third thing that catches our attention in the play is the characterization. All characters are different. All have their own problems. All have their own predicaments. They face confusion. They face some kind of a tussle. And you can see, the moment one speaks a dialogue, you can see who is talking. It's an ancient play. Mind you, viewers, it's not a play in the modern developed cultural atmosphere. This is a play that was written 2,400 years ago. And if in so early in drama writing, somebody can visualize characters on the stage who are specific characters, who are individual characters, who are concrete, who are independent, and they are different from one another, then this is a big literary aesthetic achievement. This is the second point. Third is, that at that point of time, the writer could visualize the working of the mind, and that working of the mind could theatrically be presented on the stage. It's not easy. Today we have all kinds of techniques. In the Renaissance period in Europe and England, these techniques have already struck roots. But somebody writing 2,400 years ago and dealing with the mental processes of the characters, this is something that fascinates us in this play. You have the queen, the old queen Vasa Datta, working at 2 or 3 different levels, and all the levels have been handled, or all the levels have been managed so well by the writer through the dialogue, through situations. That is really remarkable. So, so many characters. Then even Vidushak, for instance, Vidushak was solving the king's problem, but in doing so, he was also deviating from the normal role of the Vidushak, who is supposed to just create humor. This person is not creating humor. He is all the time with the king, and he is a serious person. And whenever the king is in doubt, then he takes him away from the doubt. He is using all those tricks, which means that he is more than a Vidushak. And this is a new kind of invention that the author has made. Then the theme of Shringar. This particular play is about Shringar. It's about romance. It's about pleasure. It's about the sense of enjoyment. All these things are there, and I can for instance tell you as to how Shringar can be enhanced by the particular sayings of the king. For instance, the first act ends with this kind of verse. Verse means a kind of poetry. I'm just reading out the English translation of the verse of the shlok with which the first act ends. This is the ashram scene, the tapovan scene, and at the end of the tapovan scene, this verse is set, as if like a jewel. The birds have come back to their nests. The hermits have descended into water. The fires being kindled are shining bright. The smoke is moving over the penance grove and fallen from a great height, and with his rays contracted, the sun too, having turned back his chariot, is slowly making towards the summit of the setting mountain. Just see the scene of nature. Just see how people are coming back, and now they'll finally go to sleep, and everybody is happy, everybody is calm, everybody is in some state of tranquility. This thing is shown through a poem, and a poem which is working wonders for the development of the atmosphere in which the dream sequence of the play will be presented. Then Padmavati and Vasav Datta, the kind of equation that they are able to establish. One is senior, the other is junior, one is young, the other is mature. Both of them can work together. Their interests clash, but they are able to achieve harmony. This is the second point, and then this point is done so very well so many years ago. Imagine somebody writing a play today and two parties contending with each other, and they are at loggerheads with each other. After all, it's a peace or stability in marriage is involved, and women can be very violent in this case, but this person, the writer, is able to create a kind of balance where both the women can be happy. And this invention of situation in which both can be happy is almost impossible to imagine, and this writer has done that particular part. The third is that, as I have already done in some detail, I am just repeating this, that Vasav Datta is always, the woman, always sad. And the sadness is not her sadness, but of every woman, and not of every woman, of every person who is denied the privilege that was hers, that was one's own. So see, and this sadness actually overarches everything else in the play. So play is basically sad. Only at the end there is some kind of happiness. Through the play you see nothing but sadness. In fact, it starts on a sad note. The woman lost her life, and not losing her life, only officially she lost her life, but then she came here and she has to live not like the queen, like somebody else. So imagine me, for instance, living not my own life but somebody else's life. And nothing can be worse than this. And the person who is living two lives can finally destroy oneself. So you can see that kind of sense of destruction, that kind of sense of violence to one's own self, that is there in the play and works at its center. Then you have Vidushak. Vidushak is not Vidushak, of course. This kind of a thing has also been done by Shakespeare in a number of plays, that the Vidushak ceases to be Vidushak. For instance, in King Lear this happens. But then Bhas, the writer of Vasav Datta, is able to visualize the role of Vidushak in such a fine manner at that point of time when the Vidushak would only be a kind of very normal mechanical kind of a figure on the stage. Then there is another thing of like the female garden, the garden in which women relax, and the princess is relaxing, and king's own old queen spending her time there, and the king is allowed in that because he is the son-in-law of the future son-in-law of the king of Magad. Now this is the verse that was struck me, and I thought I should be sharing this with you. The female garden is lovely owing to gentle breeze blowing and the fallen bandhujeev flowers collected in a heap. So there is a specific flower, and the flowers have fallen down on the ground, and they are beautiful flowers, and they are in a heap. This is how the visualization of the place has been done, in the play. Then one or two more things, and then I finish. The scheme of Yugandharayan finally succeeds. this works behind the back of King Udayan. King Udayan doesn't know as to what is happening. But then finally, as he was moving towards marriage, then his problem was being solved. So the two things came together. The king got married, and then the news came that he had also gone back to the old ways of his glory. Then he is made to believe that Bhasa'S Datta was burned to death in a fire, and finally she is retrieved and she didn't die. And then the last thing, and I finish here, that the play is all about fantasy aesthetically, and the last thing is that it is also about the theme of marriage. How the marriage can create problems for an individual, and that problem can be insurmountable. But in the case of this particular play, the most difficult situation has already been set right by the imagination.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. We have a caller. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, please tell your name and please tell from where you are talking.
यस मैम, मैं शहनशाह बोल रही हूँ, शहनशाह से।
जी शहनशाह जी, आप बताइए आप कहाँ से बोल रहे हैं?
ये नॉर्थ दिनाजपुर वेस्ट बंगाल से बोल रहे हैं।
जी जी, वेरी गुड, आपका स्वागत है। नाउ प्लीज आस्क अ क्वेश्चन। आपका क्वेश्चन क्या है वो पूछिए।
ये बोल रहे थे कि सर से मेरा ये क्वेश्चन है कि सर जब मैं हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर पढ़ते हूँ सर, तो उसका जो कॉन्सेप्ट प्रॉपरली जो है हमको समझ नहीं आ रही सर प्रॉपरली, तो सर कैसे क्या करें सर उसके लिए?
कौन सा कॉन्सेप्ट आपको समझ में नहीं आया है?
जी मैम,
आपने कहा कि आपको कुछ कॉन्सेप्ट समझ में नहीं आया, आप एक बार दोबारा बता दें कौन सा कॉन्सेप्ट आपको समझ में नहीं आया?
जैसा कि हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर का एंग्लो नॉर्मन।
अच्छा, ये कॉन्सेप्ट आपको समझ में नहीं आया है?
नहीं।
अच्छा, तो हम सर विल ट्राई टू हैव अनदर सेशन ऑन एंग्लो नॉर्मन कॉन्सेप्ट सो दैट आवर व्यूअर इज क्लियर अबाउट दैट.
Actually, when we are discussing Indian writing, then Anglo-Norman can be always in the background, and we are not supposed to relate in detail about that. And if one already has an opinion there, then that opinion can be compared with this. But definitely, at that point of time, there is nothing like Anglo-Norman. That thing is not there at all. I am talking about 2,400 years ago. It can be only Greek writing, to which I made a reference. But English, there is nothing like European drama at the time when this writer wrote. So we can say that this writer is going to be a precursor to a kind of a background to world literature at the level of drama. So you can visualize, for instance, the theme of marriage. A large number of plays discuss about the theme of marriage, but today, maybe in the medieval period, but this writer is talking about this in the ancient period. So maybe that's where things don't exist in other parts of the world, or exist only in a limited part of the world. At that point of time, India is contending with, is wrestling with these ideas, the man-woman relationship, the relationship of the state, whether the king should bother about these things, or whether he can sacrifice his queen or something for others. This is the question that is being asked. And in the medieval period, the kings in Europe also would be marrying into families for acquiring power and wealth, the way this king is doing through his minister at that point of time. So that kind of background is there. The writers are able to take these things like kings sacrifice everything for political gain. That is there in the European part of the world at that time, and this is true about India also at that point of time. So that kind of background can be discussed, and I think your question is good, and you can keep thinking about it, and if there can be other occasions on which you can bring up this question again.
Definitely, we believe that our friend might have got the answer of what he asked for, and we'll try to have an independent session on that. So, sir, we believe that we might have covered all what were about to finish in this session.
Yes.
So, dear friends, if you have any queries or feedback, or if you want to ask more questions from Professor Anand Prakash, so you can do write to us at info.cec@nic.in. We'll try to give answers to your question when next time Professor Anand Prakash visits our studio. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.